Hey there, thanks for joining me again today. I'm Zack and I make things for Ableton Live. I'm doing a little detour today. My previous videos have been about some devices that I've created, giving tours or example usage, but I've learned a lot from people on YouTube about making things in Macs and thought I could maybe do something too. And so I made a device the other week, and it's useful and it's pretty easy to make. What it is it's this WavScope, and all it does is show you a picture of the wave as it goes by in a track. And one cool use case that I found is to put it before and after an effect, and then you can see visually the effect of the effect on the sound. And so, like, for example, we can throw it before and after this saturator and see that what goes in is different than what comes out, and we can see that visually. We can adjust the duration of the view that we have here from like 2 bars in this case to, a 64th note, and that just kind of gives us like an oscilloscope sort of view. So let's get into making it. Let's check it out. So I'm going to just delete these devices and go to the Max for Live section here and drag a Max audio effect into my channel. And from here I can hit this edit button, and that takes us into Max. I'm going to do this kind of as a new user tutorial, so I'm going to explain some basic stuff here about Max and Max for Live. Okay, the first thing that we want to do is get this ready for presentation mode, and you'll see what that means in a second. And so let's get started by hitting Command-I. That turns on this info pane. And this is a weird thing about Macs. I really don't like the UX on this, but to get to the properties of this whole device, you have to click this P icon here, the Patcher Inspector. And once you click it, basically that view will come back when you click on the background. In my opinion, that should just be the default. Okay, so what do we need to change here? We need to change this. First of all, I like to turn on Snap to Pixel and open in presentation. And if we pick that, some stuff goes away from here. If I save this device now, and let's save this as Scoper, the device in Live goes to nothing. And if I switch into presentation mode in Max, we see that it's empty. And so we will put some things in here to show up in our device. And so let's get started. And we can, in 2 seconds, make a useful device here. And so we're going to create a couple of objects called live.scope. And what this does is it visualizes the waveform of any signal coming in, and in our case, it's the audio signal coming through our device. And the way that we can make it work is by connecting one of the outputs from the plug-in object, which comes in by default, to the left inlet of the live.scope. And now if I just play some stuff, hey look, it's already useful. If I switch into presentation mode, we're still empty. And so the way to add something to presentation mode is to select it. In the info panel, check the include in presentation checkbox. And now when we switch to presentation mode, there it is. And now we can drag it around. Let's just put it like up here in the corner and save it. And here we've got it showing up in Live. And let's do one other thing. Let's connect the other, we connected the left, let's connect the right to a second one so we can see both left and right waveforms separately. So I'm just holding down Alt and dragging on this object. That makes a copy. So I'll just connect the signal from the right outlet of plug in to the left inlet of live.scope. Switch to presentation mode. I'm going to arrange these kind of top and bottom here and have them, roughly the same size. I'll save this, and now we've got 2 scopes in the view in Live, and let's check it out. So we've got, that's cool, and we can see the left and right. Let's put low conga, turn on the mixer, put the low conga to the right, put the mid conga to the left, and okay, that works. We'll go back to Max and we'll go, cool. So I'll just close this window in Max. You can have one of these. Let's put another one after. And now we've got our cool kind of before and after visualization. You could be done at this point. You could have your first Max device at this point. But the original device that we were looking at lets us control the time view of these displays. And so let's add that. That's not too hard. And we'll learn more about Max this way. So the first thing I want to do before I get into that is I want to clean up this junk. There's always this junk that comes in when you make a new device in Live. So I'm going to just select the plug out, shift select the plug in, move them over here, and then I can just draw a rectangle around the junk and hit delete, and now they're gone. Okay, so now we've got a clean slate. Okay, so what we need is a knob to control the zoom level of these scope devices. And so that's called a live dot dial. And one thing I do all the time in Max, and I think everybody does, is you want to kind of learn how things work by using them. And one really great way to see like what's coming out of something is to use a message object. You can create a message object by double-clicking the background and typing message and hitting enter, and now you can have your message object. But once you do this a whole bunch, you'll learn the shortcut, which is to click somewhere where you want the message to be and then hit the letter M, and now you've got a message. And if you connect something to the right inlet of a message, that just sets the value of the message. So if I try to move this dial, oh, this thing is moving around. Well, what you need to do is hold down the command key and probably control on Windows while you're trying to move the dial, and now you can move the dial. And now we can see the value of that dial coming out the dial's left outlet, going into the right inlet of the message, and setting the value of this message object here from the value of the dial. So what we need to do is customize this dial for its purpose. So I'm gonna, with it selected, hit Command I again to bring up the info panel. The first thing I like to do when I create a new object is to give it a sensible name. So let's call this one like time. And link to scripting name, I don't know why I do that, but I do that, and time. Its type, this is very important, instead of being a float, which is indicated with a decimal point after a number, is to change it to an enum, because what we want is we want to have like note values coming through here as selections. And so by default, the enums are 0 and 1, and so if I move this dial enough, we get to 0, and see there's no in between, it's just either 0 or 1. But you can put anything you want in this list, and so let's just add some note values, and we're making note values that double in length every time. So we've got from a 64th note, 32nd, 16th, 8th, 4th, half, whole note, 2 notes, and 4 notes. And we'll hit enter, and now if I'm holding down command and moving this dial, now I can see all those values that I put in. And we can see what's coming out of the left outlet now is an integer. You can tell it's an integer because it doesn't have a decimal point. And it's basically the position of that dial starting at 0. Okay, so how do we get from an integer to something these scopes understand? In Max, you can hold down Option or Alt and click on an object to see help on that object. What we want to pay attention to here is this attribute called samples. And this says sets the numbers of samples to capture. Let's play around with that a little bit. So I can create a new message here and say samples, and then give it a number like 1,000. So that's a fairly low number for samples. And so if I attach this to this scope, play some stuff, they're both moving slowly, but if I command click this, the other way I can do is command click the background. Now the whole patcher is locked. You can see the lock icon in the corner here. And now you can click on things without holding down command. But I don't like to switch between modes more than I need to, so I just command click. I've always got my fingers on the keyboard. So if I command click this samples 1000 message, which is connected to the left inlet of this scope, and then play some notes, look, this top one is like an oscilloscope while the bottom one is still slow. If I connect this to the bottom one and hit it again, now they're both the same. Okay, so what I need to do is translate from our note value here to a number of samples. And we're going to take a little slightly windy road to get there. So there's an object called translate that's going to help us with this, but we still have a little windy road. So we can say translate, and I'm just going to look at the help for it. So I'm just going to make the object and then alt click on it. We've got translate here. And it says it converts from any of the fixed or relative max time values to any of the other fixed or relative time values. That's super cool. So let's see what we mean by time values. So now we have this max reference thing that opens up. Time value syntax is what we're interested in here. What we want to do is focus on ticks here. And a tick is a 480th of a quarter note. So that's kind of cool. Now we're starting to get into some math. And here we have a handy little table of like, oh, a 64th note is 30 ticks. A 32nd note is 60 ticks. Oh, okay, so we're doubling the time from a 64th to a 32nd note, and we're doubling the number of ticks. So we go 30, 60, 120 for a 16th note, and so on. So we can use a little bit of math here to get from this integer to the right number of ticks to go here. And you can use an object called expr, and what we're going to do, it took me a while to figure this out, but I'm just going to show you. I won't show you the toil of figuring it out. There's a power function here. So we want to take 2 to the power of the first integer that you receive in this inlet. Work with me here on this. So we'll take it step by step. So I'm going to connect the dial to this expr, and then I'm going to connect this message box because we don't. Oh no, I'll copy it. So we've got 0 coming out of the dial. That goes through this function and saying 2 to the power of 0, which is 1. That's handy. We've got 1 coming out. 2 to the power of 1 is 2. 4, 8, 16, blah, blah, blah. 2 to the power of 5 is 32. So we're getting closer. We've got 1, 2, 4. And we actually want this 1 to be 30, the 2 to be 60, the 4 to be 120. Well, what are we doing for all those numbers? We're just multiplying this number by 30. So we can add that times 30 here. And so now when I move this dial, hey, look, we're getting the correct tick numbers now. So if I go to like a quarter note, we're getting 480 coming out of here, and that's perfect. And so what we need to do is change this translate object from ticks to samples. And so I'm going to alt drag this message box down here, connect this outlet, connect this one to this guy, put it over here, change this, and look, we're getting something that looks like a reasonable number of samples coming out of this translate object. We're getting closer. What we need to do is say samples and then that number. And so one way we can do that, I'm just going to alt drag this to copy it, is instead of 1,000, we can say $1. And let's just bring this down, connect this, and connect this like this. So we're getting some number of samples coming out of translate. It goes into this message using this syntax. We're saying the first element of anything coming in here, add it to this word samples. And then if we move the dial now, we're getting samples and then the number. So here we are. This is exactly where we want to be. So I'm going to delete this. Let's make some space. Now I'm going to take the output of this samples and send it to both of these scope devices. So if there's one thing we need to do before we go use it is in presentation mode, our time dial goes away. So we need to right click. Here's the other way to add it to presentation. It's probably faster than hunting in the inspector over here, is just right click, add to presentation, switch to presentation view, and put it where you want it to be. Let's put it here. We can save this and close it, go back to live. Now we've got, we need to move it. Well, that ain't working. Why doesn't it work? Let's see. We've got this coming through here. We're saying samples. What the heck? Oh, okay. I see the problem. The problem is we're sending this into the right inlet, which only sets the value. It doesn't actually echo the value out the left outlet. So what we need to do is, instead of sending this to the right inlet of this message, we send it here. And in fact, we don't need this in the middle anymore. And here's one cool trick. If you hold down, with something selected, if you hold down Shift and drag on it, it'll just kind of pull it out of the wires. So let's try this again. Close my device here, go back to live. And there we go. So now you've got something where even if I change the tempo, I'm changing the tempo. I'm using my push for that. And if I decrease the tempo, it'll go slower. So it's already tempo aware. So again, at this point, you could be done. You have a very functional device. You can still put a second copy here. And we're defaulting to a 64th. That's something to bookmark, to look at. But here you are, and now you can see the before and after, and you have a time zoom control here. But maybe the next level of usefulness is, well, maybe I want these things to be linked together. Maybe when I change this to a half note, I want this other one to change to a half note, just so that they're both operating the same for me as the tool that I want them to be. So let's add that, and we'll learn some more about Max that way. So I'll delete the second one. I'll click the edit button of this one again, and we're going to exit presentation mode, go back to patching mode, and okay, we're going to add a button, a toggle that's going to link this device to other instances of the device. And so there's some stuff to put in here. So we're going to double click here and add a live.text, which is a strange name for something that's a user interface button or toggle, but cool. That's what it is. And so I'm going to get rid of these things. Okay, so we've got this live.text, and at the very bottom of the inspector, we've got text off label and text on label, and we want both of those to be link. Well, let's set the name just for good hygiene. So link to scripting name, call it link. Now it's link. And let's see how this works. So I'm going to make a new message. I'm going to click here and hit M, and then connect the left outlet to the right inlet of the message. And then holding down Command, I'll click on this link. And we see when it's on in yellow, it's emitting a 1. And when it's off, it's emitting a 0. So we can use that to control whether or not we're synchronizing this with other instances. So let's just get into making how this works, and we'll learn along the way. So I'm going to use something called a gate, which it says pass input to an outlet. And if I hover over this, we see if we send a 0 to this inlet, it'll close the gate. Non-zero opens the outlet. And if we hover over the outlet, it says it's currently closed. And what's this one? Incoming gated messages. Okay, this is cool. So what we can do is use the output of this link going to the left inlet of the gate, so that if I turn on link, if I hover over here, we say currently open. And if I turn that off, it says currently closed. So that's cool. And what we can do is take the output of this dial, and I'm going to just slide this message over here. And so with link off, if I change the dial, nothing's coming through the gate. With link on, if I change the dial, now the dial value is coming through. So we can use this to our advantage here. So let's get rid of these things now. So what we need to do is we need to send this value to other instances of this device in the live set if link is enabled. There's a natural way to do this in Max for Live called send. And what you do is you send to a named channel. And so we're going to name this link scoper. This will make more sense in a couple minutes here. So one thing I like to do with my sends is set a border color so they stand out. And if I alt drag here, I'll make a receive. And let me create a message here and add that. And so if with the link enabled, if I change this time without having a direct wired connection to this message box, we're having that value teleport between the send and receive endpoints here. And it works just as if there was a cable in between. Just as an illustration, what I'm going to do is right-click, add this message to the presentation view, just so we can see this working. So I'm going to put this here and go back to patching view and save it. And now I'll close the device. So we've got that working. If I add another one to the set and change this, we see this dial's not moving, but this message is updating. And that's because, let me delete this one, open editing. When we send this value, all instances of the device receive what's sent to that channel, that named channel. And so this will, no matter where it is, no matter what device it's in, it'll update. Now, this isn't always what you want. And this is one of these like sneaky little things in Macs that you just have to learn. If you prepend the name with 3 dashes, and then I'll put 3 dashes here, I'll save this, close the device, put a new instance here. We've got, so if I move this dial, the one on the left here is changing, the one on the right's not, because the 3 dashes are behind the scenes translated to a unique number for this device instance, and that number replaces the dashes in the channel name. And so that's a way to, the 3 dashes are a way to keep a send-receive pair private to an instance of a device. But in this case, which is probably not the normal case in Macs for Live, we don't want the 3 dashes because we want this message broadcast out to all devices. Okay, we've got our send and receive pair. And what do we want to do? When we receive this, we want to update the dial value. And let's think this through. If we just connect the receive to the left inlet of our time dial, what's going to happen is I'm going to change the dial. The number comes out this wire, goes into the gate, goes out the gate, goes to the send, comes back up here to the receive, goes into the dial. Changing this value will emit the value again, and we're going to have an infinite loop. And so what we need to do at this point is to figure out, well, how can we change what this dial is pointing out without actually having it emit its value again out this outlet. If we look at the help for this, we can see we can send a message to the dial, set a value without causing output. That sounds perfect for what we're trying. So let's do that. So just like we did with the $1 on the message here, we can say, or I'll just alt drag this and change samples to set. And then if I'm dragging and hold down shift, that can jam this in the middle of a chord. And so here we've got our receive going to the set, who will just change the position of the knob without causing output and an infinite loop. And that's what we want. However, just setting the dial position doesn't actually change the samples that are set to the scope. And so we still need to essentially send that new number into this expression object. So we're going to set the dial, and then we're going to send the number here. And so there's another common Macs object that you'll see all the time called trigger, which I use to just sort of fan out a message to be processed in a specific order. You'll see what that means here. So I'm triggering 2 integers here. And so if I receive this, let's just see what we've got here. So I'll just connect I'll make a copy, connect it to both outlets of the trigger, link is enabled, I'll change the dial, and we see both of those messages are receiving that new integer. And so what we need to do is send the first one. So I'm going to move this stuff down. I'm going to click this, shift drag it out, delete this patching wire or this cord. We want set to happen first. And here's another thing that you're just going to have to learn about Macs is the data comes out right to left. And so this right one will happen before this left one happens. And so that's very important in many cases to do things in a specific order. And so in this case, what we want to do, it's not so critical, but we want to set the value, the position of that knob first. And then we want to send that number into this expression box. I keep moving these around. One thing about making Macs patches is you can just have like crazy unmanageable spaghetti very easily. I've learned to just take my time when creating these patches and organize them visually, sensibly, and simply using color. I like to keep wires straight where I can. I like to have a consistent vertical rhythm. I like to have space around things and use comments and things like that to label them. And so let's do a little bit of that. So just like with a message, you can hit M. You can also click on the background and hit C for a comment. And let's say calculate the number of ticks for the given knob index by raising the index, or raising 2 to the power of the index, something like that. And personally, I like to use this freeze color for comments. That for me, that just visually stands out better than if it's white. Makes it easier for me to see where the comments are. Okay, so what we can do is change this value. We see everything working properly. We're not getting any errors. If there was an infinite loop, we would get an error here in Macs. Okay, so we are receiving this, but if let's imagine we've got two of these devices. One has link enabled, one does not. If we change the time zoom in the one that has link enabled, it's going to send out this channel. The one who doesn't have it enabled is going to still receive it, and all this stuff is going to happen. And so what we need is another one of these gates in between the receive and like kind of the action of the receive. So let's give it some space, move it up, select this holding down shift. Now we're jammed in the middle here, but we want this to go to the messages inlet, and then link is going to also be connected to this gate. So we've got link up here connected to the two gates. This gate is controlling whether or not changes to this dial are sent and broadcast. This gate is controlling whether or not, okay, now a number has been broadcast, are we going to pay attention to it? And so the answer is yes in both cases, according to the only if this link is enabled. Okay, so let's try this now. So I think we're close to having something that works really well. Oh, the link disappeared, so we need to add that to the presentation. So I'm going to right click, choose add to presentation, go to presentation mode, and move this. Let's put it here and give this a little bit of more space. And we're going to save it and close this device. Back in live. Still works. We're on an eighth, quarter, half. Let's put another one here. Okay, that one's unlinked. If we link it and move this, look, now both are moving in lockstep, and both scopes are responding as they should. So we're in good shape here. So again, you could be done. You have a very functional device at this point. Good to go. But you know, there's always something else to do. Let's do some cool stuff with it here. Let's put some peanut butter on it. So Let's edit it again. And maybe one cool thing to do would be to have a control of maybe just a visual vertical zoom for these waveform displays. And that's a real easy thing to do. And so we would want a dial to control that. And what that dial is going to do is the value that comes out of the dial, we will multiply with the signal value. Or let's look at what is a signal anyway. So I'm going to create a number tilde. Anything with a tilde in max is signals. So signals are like audio rate data. They're these special fancy chords. Regular old chords passing messages and numbers and stuff like that operate at a lower data rate, and they're represented more plainly. So if we connect this plug in to this signal, what are we seeing? We're seeing numbers, when it's silent, it's 0. When we see, when we get audio through there and louder audio, it's going closer to 1 or closer to -1, depending on where that wave is deviating from 0. So that's all it is. It's just a data stream of floating point numbers between -1 and 1. And if we look at the properties for one of these scopes, we can see that its range is -1 to 1. So these things are kind of made by default to work together. And so what we could do is we could multiply this number by some factor that you decide, you the user decide, through a knob to scale what we're sending to these scopes. We're not changing the audio that's coming through here. The plug-in is connected directly to the plug-out. Let's start with a live.dial. As usual, we go down here, link to scripting name, give it a long name, let's call it scale. Short name, which is actually the one that's displayed, scale. And then it's a float. That's cool because we want this to be like a multiplier. And maybe we want it to go from like 0.1 to 10. That feels exponential. So let's move this, that's still acting like an integer. That's because the unit style here is set to int. So let's change it to float. And so now we're at the minimum, 0.1. And if we move it up, we've got floating point numbers being displayed now. So good. But I'm not too happy with the range. Like I really want this, like from 0.1 to 1 should have a lot more distance on this dial. And so thankfully, this is a common problem in music stuff. Some things have an exponential relationship. Some things have a linear relationship. We have control over that stuff here. We can control that through this exponent. So if we look at what range we're trying to capture, it's 0.1 to 1 to 10. That's 3 powers of 10 involved. This is my little shortcut. So if I give an exponent of 3, now we can see how this dial responds. So now with this, almost the full half of the range is now consumed from 0.1 to 1. And then the second half is from 1 to 10 in an exponential fashion. And in using this knob, in this case, this feels right. But you can also always come back and tune this exponent depending on how you want to use it. So let's again connect this to a message and just see what's coming out. All right, it's just the number that's being displayed. That's cool. And so we can create an object which is a signal multiplier. So we want to multiply, but in a signal context. And the tilde, again, is signal stuff. Multiply 2 signals. You don't have to give it 2 signals. You can give it a signal and a float. So we've got, we need to connect this to here. Let's by default, we'll multiply by 1. Connecting to the right inlet of this changes the number that we're multiplying the signal with. So now we just need to put the signal connection, put it in the path of the signal connection to the scope. So I'm gonna just go like this, maybe make it a little prettier. Let's take this out. I can Option or Alt drag this to copy it and Shift to jam it in the middle there. And now I'll connect the dial to this one also. We'll right click this, add to presentation, go to presentation mode. Let's put our scale dial right here, save it, and let's try it. So, whoops, I'm gonna just lock this, So we hear the volume's not changing, but what we're doing is scaling the display. And so we could save this, close this window. Again, here we are, we've got a very useful device, usable device, works great. We can have multiple instances. Their time zooms are linked. Oh, I had to click that. Well, that's something to fix, isn't it? And it also defaulted to a 64th note. So let's fix some defaults here. So we start in presentation mode, Command I to show the inspector. This link button, if we scroll to the bottom, every parameter sort of object has these options of initial, enable, and initial value. So we want to enable an initial value, and the initial value should be 1. 1 in this case meaning the button is on. If we save this and close this device, now when we add a new one, a second instance to our track here, that link button is now turned on. So that's what we wanted, but we're still at a 64th, which is not what we wanted. So let's go back and edit. Command Option E, it's gives you carpal tunnel syndrome, but you'll maybe soon enough learn to use it all the time to switch so you don't have to hunt for this little button for presentation mode. Command Option E toggles between patching and presentation mode. What we want to do is set a default for this time dial. And so I'm going to make a new message here, connect it to the right inlet. I'm doing this so that I can get the default value that we want. So maybe by default, we want it to be like a whole note. And so that's index number 6. So Command I again for the inspector, go all the way down, initial enable. Oh, and because we're on 6, it picked it already, so we didn't need to do that inspection. But okay, so we can get rid of that. Now we're defaulting to a whole note. How about a default scale? Initial enable, let's set that default to 1. That seems pretty reasonable. Save that, close this window. We're back in live. I'll just add a second one here. And here we are. All our defaults are just as we want them. So scale is 1. And also double clicking a parameter will return it to its default value. Okay, so again, here we are. You've got something that said its defaults are good. You can use it, but maybe we could get a little bit cooler with the display. This is just one last thing that we could do with it. Both of our channels are the same color here. That's maybe less interesting than it could be. Let's talk about colors in Max for Live. You'll notice that these color swatches have a name on them. If I click this waveform active line color, if I click this, we are in a dynamic color. If I do this drop down, we've got all the colors from the current live theme here. And so this is, in my opinion, the way to make Max for Live devices is to use these colors appropriately, and then whatever theme the user has, they're going to carry through into your device. And the usability is going to be good, the legibility is going to be good. Now, but you may be of the sort who's like, no, I want a specific visual language to my plugins. If you maybe see what you're doing more like building little VSTs for live, maybe you want to use your own color palette here. Great. Just make sure that it's legible in different live themes, light and dark, because sometimes, if you're using one of these dynamic colors and it's a text color and if it's a light gray in your current theme, but in a user's theme, that may be a different color. So you got to make sure that if you got to go all the way one way or the other, either all in on the live colors or all in on your own custom colors. And there's really no in between there. So for this case, we are with LCD text icon. There's a similar one. So we've got LCD text icon here, and we've got LCD text icon variant. That sounds like the perfect name for what we're trying to do here. So we'll make the bottom one blue. And we can save that. Oh, that's the top one. Let's just swap these so that visually they're more correct. But we want to make something kind of nifty here visually and maybe give a toggle for it. I'll show you what I mean. So we've got two waveforms and we're seeing the positive and negative of each. maybe it's a cool sort of a view to have them be sort of two halves of one seeming waveform. And so what we can do is we can play with this range. And so for the one on the top, maybe I only want to visualize from like 0 to 1. And now see our line is at the bottom. And for the one on the bottom, maybe I want its range to be -1 to 0. And now the line's at the top. And so if I save this, close this, go back to live, we can see here's our two lines. And so they're kind of like one waveform going by. And there's a little gap. Let's fix that. I'm just on my trackpad. I'm just like open pinching to zoom in. And let's move this up one pixel. We'll move this down 1 pixel. Now they're right next to each other. I'll shift click both of them, Command I for the inspector. Let's make them not round. See, these boxes are round, have rounded corners. Let's just drag this 9 down to 0. Now they have sharp corners. So I'm looking at this box here, presentation rectangle 0, 0, 184, 82. So that's X, Y with height. And this one, X, Y with height. X is 1, so we want to move that over 0, 84, 82. So this one's 82 tall, this one's 84 tall. Let's make them both 84 tall. Well, I think that's good. I just pinch to zoom back out. And let's close our window here after saving it. And that's cool. So now there's no gap. It takes the full height. That works pretty well. But maybe in some cases you want this view, and maybe in some cases you want that separate view. So we'll go back to the editor. We'll add another little toggle button to toggle between this view and the original view that we were working with. So exiting presentation mode, Command Option E. And then I'm just going to Alt drag this link button, Command I for the inspector. We need to change its name. So we're going to call it split and join. Split join. And so its two states are going to be, let's see, when it's off, we're going to be in split mode, and in on, we're going to be in join mode. And so now if I click this, split join, split join, split join. And again, if I visualize what the output is here, join is 1, split is 0. Okay, so how can we wire this button up to change how these scopes look? And one way you can do that, if we click the scope, we have this range option. And many Macs devices, if you just send a message with the name of the parameter or the attribute you want to change, then you can just send that message to the device, and it will, or to the object, and it'll change. So like we could do range -1 to 1, and let's use decimal points to tell Macs that we're doing floats. So if I connect this to both of these and then Command click it, now they're both back to normal, how they were before. So I'm going to make 2 copies here. And so this one is going to be range 0 to 1, and this one's going to be range -1 to 0. And I can attach these to their appropriate scopes. So if I Command click this, here we are back there, here we are back there, here we are back there. So now we just need to make it so that when split goes from 0 to 1, and so that would be join mode, we want both of these messages to fire. When we go back to split mode, we want just this one to fire. And the way we can do that is with this object called cell, which is select. And we just want to say cell 0. So check this out. So if I connect the split to the left inlet of cell 0, and then I'm going to make 2 messages, one for that, or sorry, put it on the right, put it on the right. We've got a 1 that shows up here because what's this outlet? If it's the input doesn't match 0 in this case. This one sends a bang if the input matches 0. So if we go back to split, we got a bang here. So we're going to get a bang here or a 1 here, depending on the state of that button. So if I send this bang to here, That bang will trigger this range -1, 1 to go out and to be sent to both scopes. That's cool. This one, we can just connect directly to both of these message objects. Even though a 1 is coming out, we're not using a $1 in these messages, and we're going into the left inlet. So just that 1 happening is a lot like a bang, just a little poke, and it's going to cause that message object to emit its current message out its left outlet. So now we can see I'm holding down Command and clicking this, join, now these are right here, split, now they're back in the middle. I'm going to right click this. It should already be in presentation because I copied this one. And I'll go to presentation mode and place it where we want to in our UI. Let's just do it like here. And let's give that a little bit more space on top, and we'll save that. Let's close the device here and check it out. So we're in split mode, we're in join mode. Split, join. Let's make another instance. We can be doing this. We can scale each one independently. We can split and join them independently. And let's delete that. And I think the last step here, what I do is when I get to a place of functionality that I like, I look for opportunities to kind of clean this up, comment it, make it make sense, because I guarantee the next time I open this, I'm not going to remember all the context that I have right now, having just made it. And so, here we can say like toggle whether the scopes are in split mode or join mode visually. And yeah, you could probably clean this up a little better. Maybe I won't take all the time to do that. Okay, so there were some fundamentals of Max and Max for Live in this little tutorial, and you've got a very useful device out of it. Let me know what you think. What other ideas do you have for a device like this? You can go hog wild, maybe a spectrum view, maybe a true oscilloscope view. The scope object supports something like that. You name it, you make it. Share what you've done. Let's see it. Anyhow, hope you have a great one. And until next time, take care. Bye.